We are here today with Ed White, who is going to tell us all about the fascinating world of, I believe, Gamelit. I've tried to find you, but my Google algorithms are annoying and won't show me actual people I want to look up. So I think you're in Gamelit.
Well, Gamelit, Lit RPG. There's a very contentious discussion about that I guess we'll avoid.
Oh, I don't know. I like contentious discussions sometimes. Especially since I'm really terrible at genre description.
Well, the author of The Land would like to copyright Lit RPG. And of course, others feel that it is a genre in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be classified as such. International copyright law and local U.S. law tends to differ sometimes in interpretation of how it can be granted, what they deem to be copyrightable. That's the word. The intellectual property side, some only want a word that goes with a logo. Sometimes people seem to be apt to provide a copyright for a word alone, and that is, of course, rather silly.
Well, just a touch. I mean, copywriting a word. I know it's been done.
Yes,
Asimov and androids, that was a thing for a while.
It depends upon when a word was created, who coined it, how often it's used, or if it's something made up, like his name's escaping me, but he now hosts one of the late night shows, Colbert. Was it Colbert? I mean,
I'm really bad at...
Colbert has, I believe it was him. He had his own private show first. He hosted, and then CBS, if it's CBS, took him on. But there's a lot of words he made up that are even entered into the dictionary now. So, as such, he probably won't get a copyright if he chose to. But
probably not.
There are things like that where there's much discussion about that. So, I take the interpretation that many have that Lit RPG is what they term crunchy. It is very detailed gaming. Not just jargon or terminology, but it has a lot of the statistical, mathematical side of D&D derived, Dungeons and Dragons derived statistical things, as well as many well-known multiplayer online games. Whereas Gamelit is less of that. You have the stats mentioned, you have a few character sheet portions, but it's more balanced between people seeing that it's happening and it not being, as some feel, is obtrusive. It sticks out as this massive character sheet on the page.
Interesting. So where do your books lie on that spectrum?
Definitely on the light side is why I chose to say Gamelit. It's, like I said, it's really open to interpretations. They don't even use Gamelit or Lit RPG, just a matter of crunchy or light.
Crunchy or light?
Crunchy or light, yes, is the term.
I like that.
Our groups have coined, and gamers have coined as well, to a degree, because there are games that are heavy on statistics and pop up things all over the screen.
Really.
So.
What fun. So what are you working on at the moment?
Well, Battle Avatars 1 was released in September, and Book 2 will release in 2 weeks' time. All goes scheduled, as long as all the good computer robots and bots at Amazon process everything, and the helpful staff that also work on it.
Yeah. Amazon.
Well, I intend to have the pre-order go live next week on the 18th. I have to do that. That's actually what I should be working on, prepping the final files and getting that ready, because they do have their window of setting that up. And then after that, it'll be live by the end of the month. For sale, pre-order will be finished. I'm then continuing with Book 3. The book does fairly well. It's not up there with some of the huge giants, but it's certainly getting a good response. I have people who have enjoyed it and the twist of the book. And I'm also working on getting another series started, because Battle Avatars is essentially about getting lost in the game, crossing over into a parallel world, if you might say. It's Portal Fantasy as a genre as well.
Sure, yes.
And then it's got a lot of inspiration from what people are calling cultivation books. Which
Ah, yes. Now, I just recently stumbled on this. It's a fairly new genre, from what I understand.
Yes, it's based off of web novels and light novels of the Chinese Xianxia or Wuxia with gods genre that's been popular in China for years and in their manhwa comics and things.
Interesting. Okay, so details?
Well, I basically started off with the idea that the Dragon Ball Z and things like that, the My Hero Academia Academy manga and anime that's super popular, and my general like of the Wuxia genre, things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Ah, yes.
Most of
Okay.
its movies have been introduced to the American audience and the Western audience, and that is more Wuxia, but goes towards Yanzia's aspects of being able to walk on the air and seeming to fly, and some minor amounts of magic and things. But when you get into Xianxia, you are dealing outright with ghosts and demons and gods, immortality, other worlds. And I also enjoy my gaming and always played Dungeons and Dragons until recent years. Because there's people aren't around to do it. We try online and so forth, but that's just not the same.
Yeah.
Like Skyping each other while we're playing a game, and it's just kind of weird, really.
No, it's not the same.
But yeah, so I decided to look at that as well, and it was something that was also very popular. So I thought, okay, I'll do a little bit of something different, and that worked out pretty well. I did enjoy it. I guess I'll get into the history of it a little bit later, or if you have questions, that leads down that path.
Okay.
But it was essentially getting into that type of thing, cultivation, generating all these types of martial arts effects, channeling energy, developing a dantian or your core, developing ability to magic, strengthening your body, seeking to purify your body so you can live longer with the outlook to be immortal, and then the next step is to ascend into higher realms and become like basically gods, deities. So I went down that path, and then all of a sudden the Will Wright books, the Cradle series, took off. And I was writing in one genre when another genre that I would have liked to have written in really started hitting it big. So I am also going to launch a series called Vagabond Crow, and that follows in China and other worlds along the storylines of typical Xianxia and some Wuxia start, where it's obviously it's going to be close to Wuxia at the beginning because he is not yet developing up this huge, what they call power creep and many things like Dragon Ball Z and gaming and all. Right. Not going to start off with an overpowered character. And Battle Avatars is a similar matter. The main hero, David, has a life that he doesn't enjoy anymore. It's kind of lost direction. He's also found that he's ill, and he's got this opportunity to enter this game and finds that he can actually cultivate within the game, purify himself, perhaps heal himself. And then the game itself, what is it? Is it a game? Are there other worlds? What's the truth behind it? And it's threatened by invaders, which suggests that he is in another world. So it basically developed into, what is this world that he is living in? Is it real? And it starts to unfold in book 2, and then in book 3, it certainly comes to a head. And if people were enjoying the series, I will continue it, because I'm also dedicated to the readers. There are a number of things you see in commentary that books just end. They just stop. They don't end. They stop.
Oh no.
And there's the reality of making a living doing this, and having profitable series that you can follow. But I will make sure a book gets concluded, a series gets concluded correctly, if that happens to be the case. I want readers to know that as well.
Sure.
And at this point, from the history standpoint of who we are, I am a writer and a creator in a studio of like-minded artists and writers, and we have published in the past. We've done comic book work. We worked in the animation industry, conceptual-wise, in various areas of media. But while comics can be the truest sense of you getting your idea out there all the way through to being a visual standpoint, it doesn't necessarily turn over and turn around quickly if you're doing it by yourself.
Not so much.
But with a book, it is you all the way through. even if you have an editor or someone else, it's still technically all you.
Mm-hmm.
You can turn it around in a faster period. Not necessarily as fast as a comic, but then the comic isn't necessarily a complete story. So if you're going to complete that story, be it 3 or 6 issues for a trade paperback collection of a book for a graphic novel, even that graphic novel doesn't necessarily complete a story.
No.
That is a story you're telling in a novel.
Oh yeah, no. Comics take rather a longer time frame to tell a complete story, which is great fun, but also quite difficult.
Yes, and from the years of working in the industry as artist, editor, and myself as writer and artist, it's a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
From an artist standpoint, as you're trying to develop your art, you're never quite putting on the page what you want. We've also worked with freelancers. We've worked with Norm Brayfogle, the famed Batman artist, who unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. He was a delight to work with. He turned in thumbnails. It was lightning fast. He'd have even the lettering put in place because we were given full scripts. We weren't working the Marvel fashion. We would write it out and it would have dialogue.
Right.
He'd have that all ready, and then from there, he'd do up the full pencils. He inked himself. So it was a complete piece, and then we worked with various colorists.
Wow.
But it was a solidly put together project.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a delight to work with, but we also worked with other artists that took longer to work. And it is the nature of the business and artists, the artist mentality as well. And so from that standpoint, I'm committed to producing books as fast as I'm able with quality and with editing being, the editorial oversight.
Yeah.
But I'm not, whereas like, oh, this is just art and it's tra-la-la. I want to make it a business sense of I'm committed to the audience and the customer.
Right.
But it isn't so much, oh, well, it's a business. Well, then you just want to pump it out.
Yeah.
There's a balance that you need to strike. And it's not a commentary on those who put out books rapidly or those who work with ghostwriters, because I have worked as a ghostwriter for a non-fictional standpoint.
Oh, interesting.
Autobiographical things and so forth, working with those. I usually would get that work from someone else who was also ghostwriting, and we kind of, it was also research and a lot of, it's not really straight up writing. It's a lot more of data crunching, getting everything put together to
right. Yeah.
Not fun.
Huh. Interesting. I've not done much in the way of nonfiction pieces. I just got out of academia, so the idea of doing nonfiction pieces, even from a ghostwriting standpoint, is a little bit daunting.
Well, from like an advertising point, copy, things like that, we've done, and that's a different thing as well. But writing histories, bibliographies, and company history books, things like that, those types of things. It's a lot of information. They kind of just dump it on you, and you have to form a narrative through it. They also have their outline of what they want the narrative to be, and you then sit there and trying to slog through it.
Right.
And then it's really about 6 people being the one ghostwriter, or something like that.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work. So what's the process for writing your books? Because you mentioned you're plotting out a series. Do you plot out the complete series, or do you just do one book at a time, sort of a thing?
Well, what I'm plotting out was, and as I said just a couple minutes ago, I won't be plotting out. I'll actually be logging in to check the deadline on setting up a pre-order so that I can do that on time. So that's what I will be doing.
Right. Well.
But it may not be that it's scheduled to do it tomorrow, and they're saying, no, it's 72 hours, and that does not include tomorrow. It doesn't necessarily include today either. But
well, that depends on whose clock is where.
Well, you don't have to have the files loaded for the pre-order to start. And pre-order can start, therefore, when you say the date is. And, of course, the book's launch itself is then after that. So,
right.
As I said, everything's ready, and I'm not that concerned about it. I haven't gone around promoting, the book will be released on this day.
Right.
And that can, even so, the release date can be met. The pre-order would just be shorter.
Right.
And I'm interested for comments to this, as whoever may hear it, that what various people think about pre-orders, about what length of time they feel is worth it, and so forth. But as to producing books and the talk about comics and things, there's the standing universe that we play in.
Mm-hmm.
So to some extent, things are plotted out already.
Mm-hmm.
Both digital files and a nice hefty 4-drawer filing cabinet that has plenty of all the background world building information. So we are able to, and myself, depending on who owns what and all that good stuff,
Right.
but to play around within that universe and pick out something that's enjoyable to us and hopefully to readers, or again, from a business standpoint and balancing the writing to market, what is popular, what do people enjoy, what do we enjoy that we would all mutually enjoy.
Right.
So in terms of plotting out the Vagabond Crow series, I'm looking now at a certain character,
Mm-hmm.
a certain time period that the character lived,
Mm-hmm.
in which these events had taken place, and at what point would be good to start in, what works to break down the hero's journey, the call to adventure that starts this off.
Mm-hmm.
How late do you want it to be? What particular event is it? It doesn't have to be his start of his journey. It could be when all hell's already broken loose. But at what point do you want to start to tell something?
Right.
Whereas with Battle Avatars, there were some story elements that were pre-existing and outright written material. And I felt that it was good to look at a starting point with David and
Mm-hmm.
explore that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll sit down and jot all those things out, get the appropriate notes, maybe cut and paste of the digital or make some photocopies and put some things together as a little workbook.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes down to plotting a book, I basically look at a general 3-act structure, try and look at the key points that have to be met. And it's, as I'll say often, it's all about balance. You don't want it to be formulaic because you don't want the audience to go to the 75% mark and count the number of pages and say, okay, that'd be 400 pages long, 75% of that is da-da-da, and you open it, oh, look,
Yeah.
he's beating the crap out of so-and-so, and the climax is about to start. You might as well sit down and watch a movie and drag the slaughter apart to the good parts. 10%, 25%, 50%. Oh, 50% is a romance. Oh, look, the girl's left the man, and the man's sitting there crying. Yup.
Yeah, I think you might have gone a bit too far if that's what people do. Ooh.
Yeah. Well, if you get into today's Hollywood, there's a lot of that formulaic stuff going on. You can move the slider around and see all the key points that they're hitting in the screenwriting.
I'm so bad at movies these days. I get so frustrated with the writers because you can predict exactly what's going to be said. Yeah, no. Modern television.
Agendas, politics, and the screenwriting books and schooling that goes on now tends to hammer that into their head. The key is to know the techniques and try and play around with them, twist things around, but don't try and usurp people's expectations, because then you result in things like those who will like it or those who will hate what I say. But something like the Star Wars that came out,
which the modern one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Rian Johnson's one, where you purposely want to go against people's expectations. No, that's not the way to create things.
Yeah, well, there are a few.
It's a different type of movie.
You can do that.
Yeah, it's a different type of movie, a different type of film,
mm-hmm.
and it has its own genre and that's its own thing. But when you're in the space opera, massive commercial movies,
right?
That's not what that's for.
No, not so much.
Yeah.
So how is the transition from doing visual art to writing? Because so much of it happens inside the head as opposed to outside of the head, that I imagine it's quite the transition.
Transition from
drawing
art,
to text.
Drawing? Well, basically when I was young, I was always drawing up all kinds of things, like cowboys shooting each other to death and things like that. But
mm-hmm.
as we were going through school, my friends and I, our parents were concerned about the public school system and were starting to teach us as well.
Mm-hmm.
And from my side, my family got into having me write
mm-hmm.
things out that went with the characters I was drawing. So it was always kind of hand in hand with that.
Interesting.
And drawing and comics was a way to be able to, and especially the independent comics boom in the 90s,
Right.
That there was an opportunity that we saw through that as Image Comics developed and IDW and others like that, Dark Horse, that there was a means for you to get into the industry that you might not be able to easily do so in film and television and even in the traditional publishing industry. And I have friends in the publishing industry. I have people who work at publishers, and it is a very difficult business. It's even difficult for them in the business doing things. And then, of course, more recently when Amazon launched all their KDP, we saw that opportunity there. So I was always writing text-based stuff as well. The Battle Avatars goes back to that period. There is a chunk of the story, again, if readers enjoy it enough, it will get to that point. And then the files I'll be digging out will be the actual script and just writing it better than the age at which I wrote it then.
There is always the trick, rewriting old work.
Yes, and that can be troublesome, but it's all the plot points are worked out, so not all of it was finished off, and I just take that, put it into the proper setting of, from the writer's standpoint, and go from there, not taking something that's written from start to finish and trying to rework it, because that's a quagmire you never get out of.
No. I've got some old pieces that should be reworked, and no.
It can be, but it's more that you send that to a developmental editor, they then mark it all up, and then you work on it, rather than you doing it wholesale yourself and not killing your darlings. Let someone that you trust and you get into, even, you're always doing business with them. This is part of it. You can even get a proper rate for working with them, more extent with things like that as well. And then it's worth spending money on that to make use of it. And then it's not time, quote unquote, wasted in the past of having put it together.
So then how long have you been working on the Battle Avatar series? Because it sounds like it's been a process.
Well, not in terms of creating it. It's just one part of the universe. So any aspect of it is not a matter of, oh God, I don't want to start reading this series because I'll get completely lost. I got to read this to read that to follow that to get the toy about the thing and the ante. It's not like that. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Thank goodness.
But also, I've not been belaboring some project that'll never see an end. It's Battle Avatars itself, as it stands as the series on Amazon, and as a novel, is written from last year to now. Plotting out through the several books and then getting book 1 written, getting book 2 written. It took basically about a year, as well as plotting out the other series and the rest of Battle Avatars with a schedule in mind, so that work would be put together. In terms of how long it or the other universes existed, it's as long as the studios call it a first salvo, and a bit longer than that. So we can easily say about 20 years that all the various content in terms of world building. So places that David can go, I have 20 years of various ideas and places and existent stories and other members of the world that he can go and visit.
Yeah, what fun. So this studio sounds like it's a collaborative world-building effort, but not necessarily a collaborative story-writing effort. How is that going?
Well, we basically created a first salvo to put out our comics, and we worked together, putting out these stories, and a huge chunk of it I came in with, and then a couple of the other partners also have characters, and those characters play together. And then it's as easy as who owns what there's a multiverse. Scientists believe that there's a multiverse. There's a PBS, their YouTube channel just recently released a theory that scientists have been discussing, that for life to exist, you need a multiverse so that the mathematical possibility allows life without God, to spontaneously occur.
Interesting.
But in our universe, there's a multiverse because every universe is full, or most universes are full of life of some sort.
Sure.
So if you're following the universe that I talk about, there may be other characters from other studio mates that exist in that universe, and
Right.
they are, they both come from Earth, so it's on the same Earth. It's the same as you go to DC, you're on, or Marvel's 616 Earth. You have these different people together.
Right.
But the stuff that they own could be classified as their universe, their Earth,
Interesting.
multiverse. It's not necessarily the case that each person has their own complete universe, and we do like the idea of the Prime Earth of the DC as or whatever they're calling it now.
Yeah, I've lost track.
They've relaunched everything since the metal arc. That there is one place, one Earth, the Prime Earth. We do call it the Prime Earth ourselves, and that's where you find most of our characters. But
Interesting.
you will learn some elements of that in Battle Avatars Book 2.
Right.
Little bit. So a couple of people have already figured it out. But then you're genre savvy, and to discuss something as early, the past is the future. If you have a likelihood of something like that happening, it's probably so.
Interesting.
But I enjoy reviews for that point, for that purpose, in that there are readers who are completely lost and they get so angry, and then another reviewer will be like, "Why is that person so angry? Like, this is a Portal fantasy book.
Right.
I think they're on another world."
Huh. Interesting. Interesting. Portal fantasy is always fun because I am strangely fond of theoretical physics and the jumping to parallel worlds. So how much of that actually occurs in your pieces?
Well, one of my first books was from the Narnia series. I'm not sure if Prince Caspian was the first book, but that's the one I remember the most. And that's Portal fantasy. And there's that whole escapism. And as the world becomes more hectic, you want escapism. And you go to media for escapism and books for escapism.
Right.
And well, what more than to escape into a book where the person's escaping? It's all kind of meta. And in the books, it tends to be an element, you can say a trope of my writing per se, right? Like, the reason I chose to make sure I label Battle Avatars as Zanzia / Gamelit or Gamelit / Zanzia is that those are tropes that are in my writing.
Right.
Channeling a life force, building up energy within you. It's not just that necessarily you have you have a superpower and you can just punch the crap out of stuff. Well, it's more that you are channeling your life force or pulling more life force or ley energy or dragon lines into yourself to strengthen yourself to do that. Not that I don't have people in other stories that are just because they're strong.
Right.
So, but that's a trope. So I would say, if anything, the Portal fantasy element is a trope, but there is, from those years of working it out, all of the physics that you would love, there is a huge amount of it, and if people were interested in that, there may be some books where some of the characters are babbling about it. They'll get into Trek speak.
Interesting.
There's a whole scientific-based, like reality-based physics and science-based idea, theoretical and quantum, as well as, of course, the made-up angle of it to further explain it. But it's there, yes. I don't go into it. That's not something. There's a couple of the terms are in Battle Avatar. Some of the terminology, but it's not. It doesn't turn into technobabble and nothing against technobabble because you all know you love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just I like seeing things sort of scientific without being over the top, I guess. So I'm very interested in your books. They sound fascinating.
Well, I like the idea of say the TARDIS in Doctor Who, where it's bigger on the inside.
Right.
That's something that we have talked about for many years, that I call it an extrapolation, or something that has added or even potentially infinite depth. So if you like physics talk and this type of thing, if you go into a hidden valley,
yes,
the valley has more depth, height, length, width, and depth that allows for the tesseract ability or phenomenon that gives you that bigger on the inside.
Interesting.
That's a very simple version of we think of these things. Add that there.
So how much time do you spend working out the technical bits?
Funnily, funnily, that's not really a word. Oddly enough, funny enough, sometimes it just comes to us. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we'll look at things like a word like plex, complex, which is weaving. Mm-hmm. Weaving of reality is in Battle Avatars, and the nature of what is the landscape, the game within the book. And we'll look at that and be like, okay, well, what is that? A plex is a connection between two places. So you have something like a wormhole. Well, that's a plex.
Aha.
Simple as that. And how long did that take for me to explain it to you? That's about as quick as it came to us. There is the thing, I guess, I don't know where you stand on it, but there are some people who just don't want to hear how stories tell themselves, oh, no, a person makes up the stories. Oh. Anyone who writes can tell you sometimes it's an obsession and sometimes it's writing itself.
Yes.
Sometimes even those technical things kind of come out. Like, they're just out of the blue. I'll be like, oh, that's how that works. That's why, the story thing that we couldn't figure out why we weren't happy with it is because we were trying to force it, per se, or whatever that event might be. Mm-hmm. It turns out this, let's say, scientific reason for something happening explains what happens, and now that whole scene in the book flows properly.
Huh. Interesting. Fun. I have many ideas now that I could probably go through, but shouldn't because time is a thing. So, for people who are trying to get into... I'm going to go with your genre because it is one that is not as old as some of the other ones out there in the spec-fic world. Do you have any traps that they should avoid?
Traps in terms of writing?
Writing or development or anything from A to Z.
Well, from our standpoint, and one of the studio mates who does not write in the, let's say, the Salvoverse, the larger shared universe, although technically even that, from a scientific basis, it's just so far out in the multiverse that you just haven't reached it. They they are very caught up with the gaming and mechanical aspects of it. Converting or backtracking how some of the D&D electronic files work. Create something that's basically a spreadsheet. Don't get so lost in the game unless you're really writing a crunchy one, or part of your purpose is to perhaps co-start a community that plays with those games set in your world, which is certainly also lucrative in the future, but also fun. The story comes first. It's always the story. And the gaming aspects have to be in service of the story as well.
Right.
And stating those statistics, mechanics, and the like should be used in service of the story. So you don't have to mention every aspect of it. You don't have a huge character sheet. If he's increased his strength or his constitution, then that's basically all you have to state. Things like that. Don't get so caught up in it. That's a huge one. And other than that, it's not too many negative aspects other than be committed to plot out, from start to finish the book. I know that a lot of readers are saying that they don't like cliffhangers, but they love them. They'll say they hate them, but constructed in terms of you've completed a major point in the character's growth.
Right.
And then the book can end. If it's a cliffhanger and there's not more stuff revealed, well, it is a series, and this is the nature of the business we're in. We are in a new age of pulp.
Right.
And that's part of the business. We're not writing great literary works of one single novel. We can release those single novels, but if you go back into those people who are trying to make a living out of doing this and pursuing their passion, single book has a drop-off in sales.
Right.
Nothing to drive back to that book, and thus it's not lucrative enough at the same token and time, and that has to be considered. So, but don't have a balance between what is needed for your audience, for people who rightfully say, well, that's not right. You're treating it like a business. You don't care about the art, or you don't care about the readers. There's that balance of anything you're writing. But when it comes to game lit, you can't say that either. Like, there's going to be people who chase the hot ticket, and they'll create a book that's a gaming book because they know that it's popular.
Yes, interesting. Huh. I know that right to market is a fairly common occurrence. I don't see it as much as otherwise because I'm on the other end of the indie spectrum, people who are sort of not necessarily writing to market. But I do encounter it occasionally, and it's always interesting to see what different opinions surround the issue.
Yeah, it's a balanced thing. You, as a writer, you know you need to have that income, and if you're going to pursue it solidly, that income is what's going to make it work.
Right.
You can't chase a fad at the same time. And likewise, I wanted to do gaming stuff, and I did, but I also liked doing the cultivation side. But had I just only written a cultivation book, I would have actually been ahead of the market.
Right.
So, do write what you love, but if it's some really weird niche thing, realize that it may not do well, but don't go into it expecting it to do fantastic and then get depressed. Don't get depressed about it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Western series.
Okay, that's
is
different.
locked heavily into the universe, and it goes down that cultivation trope. But
Right.
Are people going to read it and get pissed off that it doesn't remain a Western, or are they not going to see it because it's a Western?
If you've moved the Western into the cultivation genre, wouldn't it then technically be a space opera?
Well, no, because the cultivation is just Eastern fantasy, whereas Western
True.
is the closest you can get to a lot of the wuxia. It's actually the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you break down all of the genre tropes of what goes on,
Mm-hmm.
a Western story with cowboys and all,
Right.
whether it's in the past or modern day, is the closest you have to a wuxia or xianxia, because an errant knight tends to be the focal point, and that's what a cowboy is. He's also and knights are people who ride horses, and around you go, and down the rabbit hole.
Right. No, I never saw that connection before, but now that you've mentioned it, it makes perfect sense.
But yes, there are space gods in the Western at the later books, so kind of involves space later.
Okay, cool. Very exciting. Well, I'm very interested to read all your books now because they sound really fascinating.
Well, in terms of something like the Western and things like that niche, when you build up a fan base, or if you have a fan base and they're interested in seeing other books,
right,
and then more realistically look at how those books will do and pursuing them. So, there is no Western coming out at the moment. No one get excited. I'm not saying that I'm launching that as a third thing. It's
just an idea.
It's written, but I'm just not putting it out as yet because
okay.
I want to make sure that I have you have a sizable enough base so it does well, and it's not so much putting something out and then having to go back to it to get attention to it.
Right.
It's all, like I said, years of working in the industry and marketing and sales and things, and I don't want to split focus either. I want readers to know I'm committed to doing the first few books of Battle Avatars, and then I'm launching Vagabond Crow, and while there's a studio, there's not a bunch of us writing it. I'm writing these, and
right.
Just my two hands.
Right. Well, thank you for all of that. It's very interesting. I learned a lot about the theory of multiverse, which I didn't know before, and now I have to do more research on because physics. And so thank you so much for talking with me. It's been great.
I appreciate it.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, writing related or otherwise?
Well, I was going to say, I will, that you talk a lot about the science and everything else. So what is your particular interest in writing yourself in terms of your focal, what you would
I'm a linguist. I'm a language nerd.
Oh, Well, there's a lot of that for world building.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, language, the science of language, tearing it into tiny pieces and putting it together. It's, I get far too interested in these things, and the mundanes go and look at me a little funny, but I enjoy it.
That's the only thing that we haven't done. We've considered it. We have. He's not dead. We have a friend, but he lives overseas now. He was into languages here and there, and he knew some various professors. And for a little while, we were thinking of developing some languages for some key alien races and things like that. But we didn't pursue that because it wasn't in the moment for years anything we were publishing. And of course, we'd want to pay that person, so we just said no.
Sure.
No, we wouldn't do that.
No, conlangs are my absolute favorite.
It's great, and you have a fan base that eat it up, so it's always a fun thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic evening, and I'm very interested in your book, so I'm going to go do some research.
All right. Thank you.